He's dirty, ragged, silent. For 6 years, people pass him by without a second glance, except Laura. She brings a sandwich every morning, never asking questions. They think he's just another homeless vet. What they don't know, he's Sergeant George Buckley, a decorated Marine with battles etched into his soul. And when 4 Marines in dress blues walk into her cafe with a folded flag and a medal, everything changes. Stick around because kindness just became a battlefield, and this time the quiet soldier gets the last salute. Drop your location and the time you're watching in the comments below. We appreciate every subscriber who joins our community. Through the frosted window of Henderson's cafe, I watch her methodically wrap another sandwich, my weathered reflection ghosting across the glass. The weight of my service medal feels heavier tonight in my coat pocket, pressing against my ribs like an accusation. 20 years of Marine Corps pride screams at me to walk away, but my stomach's hollow ache has become a more persuasive commander these days. I am Sergeant George Buckley, decorated Marine now master of shadows and back alley timing. The irony doesn't escape me, how I once commanded platoons in combat zones, and now I command only the careful choreography of avoiding human contact. The metal clinks softly against the brick wall. As I shift position, the sound echoing like distant gunfire in my memory. Just leave it, I mutter to myself, watching Laura Henderson. I learned her name from the cafe's sign months ago. Place the package in our unspoken drop zone. Marines don't take handouts. But even as the words leave my lips, I know I'll wait until she disappears, just like every other night. The same tactical patience that kept me alive in combat now serves a different mission surviving shame. She pauses longer than usual tonight, her hand lingering on the brown paper bag. Something's different. The security light catches her face as she turns, and for a split second, our eyes meet through the window. My heart rate spikes, tactical error exposure of position. Her eyes widen in recognition not of who I am, but of what I've become. The metal feels like it's burning through my pocket now. 20 years of honor reduced to this moment of being seen. The weight of it triggers a memory. A Marine's pride is his shield. My drill instructor used to say, but sometimes the bravest thing is knowing when to lower it. Freeze. Click here if you've ever had to choose between pride and survival. I step back into the shadows, my breathing controlled, like I'm back on a recon mission. But her voice carries clearly in the night air. I'll be inside if you'd like some coffee. It's warm in here. Simple words, but they hit harder than any firefight I've been in. The choice she's offering. It's not just about food anymore. The metal clinks again as I shift my weight, a sound like chains breaking. Behind me, a passing car's headlights illuminate a small American flag sticker on the cafe's window, and suddenly I'm back in formation watching similar flags being folded with precision and purpose. The memory stings. How far I've fallen from that man in pressed blues accepting commendations. Have you ever stood at the crossroads of who you were and who you've become? The question echoes in my mind as I stare at that back door, my hand unconsciously gripping the metal through my coat. 20 years of combat training never prepared me for this battlefield, the one where the enemy is your own pride. The cafe's warmth beckons through the crack under the door, carrying the scent of coffee and something else. Possibility, maybe. Or redemption. My fingers trace the edges of the metal one more time. Some battles are won by advancing, others by surrendering. But first you have to choose which war you're really fighting. Stufeist or type courage. If you believe sometimes the strongest thing we can do is ask for help. What happens when a Marine's strongest weapon, his pride, becomes his heaviest burden? The answer waits behind that door, along with a woman whose quiet persistence has outlasted my carefully constructed defenses. The real question is, will tonight be the night I finally lower my shield? The security light flickers, casting my shadow long against the alley wall. In its harsh glare, I see two versions of myself. The Marine sergeant who never needed help, and the man who's learned that sometimes survival requires a different kind of courage. The metal in my pocket seems to pulse with each heartbeat, asking which version will win tonight's battle. Subscribe to witness a Marine's toughest mission yet, finding his way home through an unexpected act of kindness and discovering that sometimes the greatest honor lies in accepting help from those who see our worth, even when we've forgotten it ourselves. Officer Marcus Thorne stared at the growing stack of complaints on his desk, each one a testament to Laura Henderson's persistent disruption of the neighborhood order. His jaw clenched as he recalled last night's confrontation when he'd tried to intimidate her into stopping her nightly food ritual. The badge on his chest, polished to a mirror shine this morning, now felt uncomfortably heavy. 6 years of enabling vagrants, he muttered, scrolling through the precinct's database. 6 years of undermining everything we've worked for. His fingers drummed against the mahogany desk, a habit from his academy days, when Sergeant Reynolds had taught him that maintaining order meant controlling every variable, every person. The security footage from Laura's café played on his monitor, showing her quiet defiance as she continued her nightly routine. Something about her calm determination made his skin crawl. It reminded him of his father's words about compassion being strength, words he'd long since buried under layers of protocol and power. A new email popped up from City Hall. Budget allocations for homeless deterrent architecture around the café district. Officer Thorne smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. He'd championed these measures, convinced they were necessary for neighborhood improvement. The scientific studies he'd cited in his proposals painted homelessness as a choice, a moral failing. Data doesn't lie, he whispered, touching his badge for reassurance. But lately the badge's weight felt different. Each morning as he pinned it on, he remembered the veteran he'd forced to move last week. The man's military bearing, even in ragged clothes, had triggered something uncomfortable in Thorne's chest. He pushed the memory away, focusing instead on the commendations lining his office walls. "Sir." Officer Jenkins appeared at his door holding more reports. "The Business Association is asking about Henderson's Café again. They're saying her charitable activities are affecting property values." Thorne's hand instinctively reached for his badge, fingers tracing its edges. "Tell them I'm handling it personally." The words tasted bitter, like the coffee growing cold on his desk. 6 years of complaints, yet Henderson hadn't broken a single law. She'd found the loopholes operated within them perfectly. His computer pinged. Another email, this time from his old academy mentor. "Remember what I taught you, Marcus. Control the streets, control the narrative. Can't have bleeding hearts undermining the system." But as he drafted another citation for Henderson's Café, his hands hesitated over the keyboard. Through his office window, he watched a group of suited developers surveying the street. Their gestures reminded him of vultures circling, waiting for weakness. Was this what control looked like? The afternoon sun caught his badge, casting fractured reflections across his citation forms. In the glare, he saw his own reflection distorted and strange. When had maintaining order become about crushing kindness? Have you ever questioned what you've become? The thought emerged unbidden in his father's voice. Officer Marcus Thorne straightened his uniform, pushed the doubt away. But as he prepared for another night of maintaining order, the badge felt heavier than ever. Type control in the comments if you've ever witnessed kindness being punished in the name of order. The complaints continued to pile up, each one a paper bullet in his war against Henderson's compassion. But somewhere between the lines of regulatory code and zoning violations, Officer Marcus Thorne felt the first cracks in his certainty, hairline fractures in the foundation of his power. The night shift would begin soon, and with it another battle in his crusade against mercy. Yet for the first time in years, he wasn't sure which side he was really fighting for. Using the silver moonlight reflecting off his Marine Corps medal, Sergeant George Buckley studied his reflection in a rain-slicked window, barely recognizing the hollow-cheeked man staring back. The persistent cough that had been his unwanted companion these past weeks tore through his chest again, leaving him doubled over against the brick wall of what he now called home. A narrow alley behind Laura Henderson's café. The metal felt heavier tonight, each coughing fit, making his fingers clench around the cold metal that had once represented pride, but now served as a bitter reminder of how far he'd fallen. Sergeant George Buckley, decorated Marine, now reduced to counting the hours by the steam rising from paper bags left by a stranger who didn't even know his name. The fever made everything blur, the present melting into memories of Fallujah. In his delirium, the distant sirens transformed into incoming fire, the flickering street lamp becoming muzzle flashes. Sergeant George Buckley pressed himself against the wall, his training kicking in even as his rational mind fought to separate then from now. A notification sound from a nearby diner's phone cut through his haze. Someone was filming. Again. He could see the glow of phones pointed toward Laura's café, their owners whispering about Folkwantwater's last watch. His fingers traced the metal's edges, a habit born of countless sleepless nights. The irony wasn't lost on him, a Marine who'd led men through warfare now hiding from civilian cameras like enemy surveillance. The fever spiked as night deepened. Sergeant George Buckley's world narrowed to the rough brick against his back and the rhythmic wheeze of his breathing. He could hear Laura inside her café, the familiar sounds of closing time floating through the walls. Soon she would appear with her nightly offering, unaware that her simple act of kindness had become social media's latest obsession. His cough echoed off the alley walls, and for the first time in years, Sergeant George Buckley felt true fear. Not the controlled fear of combat, but the raw terror of realizing his body was betraying him. The metal slipped from his trembling fingers, clattering against the pavement with a sound that seemed to echo his own fall from grace. Through fever-glazed eyes, he watched Laura's silhouette approach with her usual bag of food. The steam rising from it looked like hope made visible, but tonight it was tinged with something else, an awareness that his time might be running out. The phones recorded her act of kindness, their artificial eyes unknowingly documenting what could be his last night in this alley. Share this if you believe in angels. Last watch is more than a trend. It's a wake-up call. The words floated from one of the phones, making Sergeant George Buckley sink deeper into his shadowed corner. The viral spotlight on Laura's ritual felt like a spotlight on his shame, even as his military pride warred with his desperate need for her continued kindness. As consciousness wavered, Sergeant George Buckley's thoughts drifted to the bitter truth. He'd survived 3 tours in hell only to face defeat in an American alley with nothing but a viral hashtag and a kind stranger's food to mark his passing. The medal now retrieved and clutched in his burning hand seemed to pulse with the weight of all he'd lost. Have you ever watched hope arrive in a paper bag knowing it might be the last time Sergeant George Buckley had? And as the fever claimed more of his awareness, he wondered if anyone watching the viral videos could see the real story. Not just of Laura's kindness, but of how a decorated Marine had become its desperate recipient. The night grew colder, but Sergeant George Buckley barely noticed. His world had narrowed to the sound of his own labored breathing and the distant echo of viewers counting clicks, while his past glory and present shame merged in a fever dream of what could have been. The stark fluorescent lights of the VA hospital burned George Buckley's eyes, a harsh contrast to the familiar darkness of his concrete sanctuary. 6 years of shadows had carved deep lines into his weathered face, but today his Marine Corps bearing returned with each labored breath. The pristine white walls felt like an accusation mocking the grit and grime he'd worn like camouflage on the streets. Name, rank, and service number, Marine, the doctor prompted gently. George's fingers traced the worn edges of the medal in his pocket, his anchor to a life before the streets. Sergeant George Buckley, United States Marine Corps, service number. His voice cracked, but he forced himself to continue. The words felt foreign after years of self-imposed silence. The steady beep of the heart monitor marked time like artillery fire in the distance. Each pulse reminded him of Laura Henderson's footsteps, approaching his hidden spot behind her café every morning for 6 years. Never pushing, never demanding, just leaving sustenance and dignity in equal measure. I need you to contact my old unit. George managed his voice stronger now. 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. There's someone who needs to know. If. He couldn't finish the sentence, but the doctor understood. The medal came out of his pocket one last time. His trembling hands worked methodically, cleaning years of tarnish from its surface. The familiar ritual grounded him like field stripping a weapon. Each stroke revealed the brass beneath, telling a story of honor earned and lost, and perhaps found again. Type Semper Fi if you believe in second chances. Sir, the nurse hesitated in the doorway. The Marines you asked for, they're here. 4 figures in dress blues filed in their presence, filling the sterile room with an energy George hadn't felt in years. Their faces were different, but he recognized the look, the unwavering commitment to leave no Marine behind. Sergeant Buckley, the lead Marine, spoke. We found her. Ms. Henderson is on her way. George's fingers clutched the now gleaming medal. Tell her. He paused, gathering strength. Tell her that Marines pay their debts. 6 years of morning coffee and sandwiches. 6 years of dignity when I couldn't face myself. She needs to know her mission wasn't wasted. The heart monitor's rhythm faltered slightly, but George's voice remained steady. Some battles aren't fought with weapons. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is a simple act of kindness, repeated without question or reward. The youngest Marine stepped forward, holding something carefully folded. Sergeant, we brought this for when she arrives. She should understand what her kindness meant to one of our own. George nodded, recognizing the triangular shape of a folded flag. His eyes burned, but not from the fluorescent lights this time. Semper Fidelis. He whispered the motto, carrying 6 years of gratitude. The sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway drew closer. George closed his eyes, the medal warm in his palm, waiting for the moment to complete his final mission, to thank the woman who'd never stopped believing in the Marine behind the shadows. Share this story with Aufwars Angriff Marines. Never forget if you believe kindness can save lives. The door opened, and for the first time in 6 years, George Buckley prepared to face his guardian angel, standing tall, a Marine to the end, ready to deliver his last and most important report. George Buckley sat rigid in his hospital bed, the morning light catching the few medals he hadn't pawned during those dark years. The weight of his Marine dress blues felt foreign now, like armor from another life, but he'd insisted on wearing them for this moment. His hand steady even after everything smoothed the crisp fabric as he waited. Sergeant Buckley, sir. 4 Marines in immaculate dress blues filed into his room, their faces solemn but their eyes holding something deeper, recognition perhaps, or brotherhood. The lead Marine carried a precisely folded American flag, its triangular shape a stark reminder of sacrifices made and honors earned. At ease. George managed his voice rougher than he remembered. The words caught in his throat as he began to speak, but he forced them out. This story had to be told. Before you execute your orders, there's something you need to know about Laura Henderson. His fingers traced the edge of his final medal, the one he'd refused to part with even in his darkest hours. For 6 years I was invisible to this world, a ghost in my own country. But there was one person who saw me, really saw me, even when I couldn't bear to be seen. The youngest Marine shifted slightly, his eyes fixed on George's face as the story unfolded. Every morning without fail, she'd leave food by that bench. Never made a show of it. Never asked for my story. Just quiet dignity and a sandwich. Do you know what that means to a Marine who's lost everything except his pride? George's voice grew stronger as he continued. I watched her café struggle through COVID, watched her work double shifts to keep her staff paid. But that food never stopped coming. Not once in 6 years. Some people wear their heroism like a badge. Laura Henderson wore hers like a hairnet and an apron stained with flour. He lifted the medal from his chest, its gold surface catching the light. This is going with that flag when you present it, and I need you to tell her something for me. George's eyes met each Marine's gaze in turn. Tell her that in all my years of service, I never met a braver soldier than the one who fought with kindness instead of weapons. Tell her that while I was fighting my last battle with cancer, she was my supply line, my reinforcements, my hope. The lead Marine stepped forward, accepting the medal with the reverence it deserved. We'll make sure she understands, Sergeant. One more thing. George said, his voice barely above a whisper now. Tell her that some wars aren't won with bullets. Some are won with ham sandwiches and unspoken understanding. Tell her she saved more than just one old Marine. She saved my faith in humanity. The machines beeped steadily in the background as George leaned back, exhausted but at peace. Semper Fi, Laura Henderson, he murmured. Mission accomplished. Later that day, as Laura Henderson accepted a folded flag and a medal from 4 stoic Marines, the story of her quiet war on hopelessness would spread across social media with Afangasa quiet heroes. But she wouldn't see it immediately. She was too busy preparing the next day's sandwiches, fighting her war one meal at a time. Share this story if you believe the greatest heroes are often the quietest. Quiet heroes.